Hello everyone, it's Lindsay, and today we are back in the Redemption Unwrapped devotional from ByTheWell4God. This is sold out, however, they do still have the Christmas kit from last year, so if you haven't started in on anything yet and are looking for something, I will link that down below for you guys. But I am working on day 15. I'm kind of skipping around trying to keep up with you guys if you're doing day by day. So day 15, we're talking about the gift of a new heart. We're talking about Ezekiel 36:26 says, "And I will give you a new heart. I will remove the heart of stone and give you a heart of flesh." So I am once again creating another MemoryDex card. I did off camera go ahead and cut out a card using a die out of some watercolor paper. You can use the punch if you've got it, but it's sold out most places. So I've been using the dies to give you guys another option. So I will link those down below. You do need a die cutting machine, or you can just hand cut them out and use a template. There is a template in the printables. So you can take a look at that. These don't have the holes on them already. So you may need to at least purchase the blank cards from Heidi Swap and then use that as a template to cut your holes if you don't have a die or the hole punch, if that makes sense. But these just kind of make it nice. They're nice and small and quick and easy. And I'm going to be playing with some texture paste and distress oxide inks and things like that that maybe you're not comfortable using in your Bible are perfect for cards like this to play around with some more of that mixed media type thing. So I've got my card. I've got some stencils I'm going to play with. These are stencils that I created myself using my Silhouette Cameo. I will link a video down below talking about how I do that. But you can find stencils. ByTheWell4God has a variety of stencils in their shop, as well as scrapbook.com. So I will link some options down below for you guys. I just have one that has like some little dots like snow and then some little stars. So I'll be using those. I've got a couple of the stamp sets. I've got the winter critters. I've got Practically Perfect. I'm going to be using the star piece. I'm going to be using the tickets and numbers. And I've already gone ahead and used the Elemental Alpha. I stamped it on some of the pattern papers that you can purchase from ByTheWell4God. I love that they did this time around. I hope that they're going to do this in the future. So that was these printed patterned papers, and I just stamped and cut out my title from there. And what kind of started this whole thing was I got these new paints. These are actually gouache paints from Paper Fashion. I got these from ByTheWell4God. They have two different sets. They're slightly different colors. So this is set number 2. I just liked the purples and thought the colors kind of worked with some of the Christmas kits that are out there right now. I've never painted with gouache before. My understanding is it's between acrylic paint and watercolor. So it's more opaque than watercolor, but more workable than acrylic paint. And so I kind of just wanted to play with those. So we're going to stamp some images and paint them out and then create a fun little background. So let me go ahead and put you on fast forward and we will put this card together. Okay, so I'm going to start by blending some Distress Oxide ink for my background. I have Stormy Sky and Weathered Wood. Now I think I did Weathered Wood towards the bottom of the card, and really now that I'm looking at the colors I should have swapped that, but that's okay. I was just kind of going for a like grayish snowy sky just to give me some color in the background. And there's this really neat technique that you can do with distress inks because they're water reactive that will give you kind of that snowy effect. So that's why I picked these. Distress Oxide inks are much easier to blend than the distress inks, the regular distress inks. So I'm just using a blending tool. I'm working on a non-stick mat. Everything will be linked down below for you guys. And I'm just leaving it fairly messily blended because we're going to do some water techniques on here. So I'm layering my snow stencil over the top of the card, and then I'm using a wet baby wipe just to rub through the stencil, and this is going to pick up some of the color. Because it reacts with water, you're able to pick it up and remove the color in those areas. In hindsight, this stencil is a little bit small for this technique because it's kind of hard to get through there with the baby wipe and it doesn't show up too much, but if you have bigger openings in your stencil, this works really well. And to add more of that snow effect, I decided to go in and just spray some water. It's just plain water on the card and then dab it up with my paper towel. Again, that's going to remove some of the color and just really gives it that kind of snowy, soft effect. And if you don't have a good blend on the background, it's okay because spraying it with the water kind of helps everything to blend together and hides any imperfections in your blending. So now that that's dry, I can start stamping. So I'm going to pull this really cute border piece with these stars. I've been seeing a lot of you guys using this piece, and it is super cute. So I'm going to load that up on a block and add that towards the top of the card. I am going to stamp with some VersaFine Onyx Black ink. I'm going to go in and color in the stars with the gouache paint. So I want to make sure that I'm using something that is waterproof, like archival ink, stays on, VersaFine, and just make sure that it's heat set before I go in with any other mediums. So now I'm going to layer up my star stencil, and I'm going to be putting some medium through the stencil and trying to avoid where my stamping is because I don't want to cover up those stamped lines. But I initially pulled out my Texture Luxe and it was rock hard, so I had to throw that away. Try to grab my regular texture paste. It was rock hard, had to throw it away. So learn from my mistakes, use your supplies, don't just let them sit in a drawer. So the only thing that I had on hand for texture was this clear texture paste. It's a lot like matte gel medium, so it's a little bit more liquidy than I wanted. So I'm going to link texture paste down below because that would have been the better thing to use through a stencil, and it gives you a more puffy look. But I am mixing some light gold acrylic ink in with that texture paste to color it. When you mix this ink in with things like matte gel medium, texture paste, it changes the reflective properties of that ink. So you'll see it looks more like a deep yellow. It does have some shimmer to it, but it really does change the look of it, which I wasn't anticipating, but it worked out okay. So I'm just using a spatula to lightly push that through the stencil. I'm making sure to hold the stencil down nice and tight because this texture paste is super liquidy. It kind of wants to smush through the stencil, but you can see there how that does have some shimmer and shine and a little bit of texture, which is what I was looking for. So I let that dry, and then we're going to move on to the bears. So I've cut out a scrap piece of watercolor paper, and I'm going to load this up into my stamp positioning tool, and that's because I'm going to double stamp this image. I'm going to stamp it a second time after I painted it, and so using a tool like this makes sure that I get the stamp in the exact same spot. So I'm going to ink it up with some VersaFine Onyx Black ink, and then I'm going to leave the stamp in that stamp positioner until I'm ready to restamp. So I made sure that that ink was dry, and then now I'm going in with my gouache paints. Like I said, this is the very first time I've ever used gouache. I think it works better if your paintbrush is wet. You do want to add a little bit of water to it just so that it blends out a little bit easier and it doesn't dry as quickly when you're working with it. But one of the neat things about gouache is you can kind of change how opaque it is depending on how much water you use, which is similar to watercolors. However, watercolors never really get, 100% opaque, where these give you more of the payoff of like an acrylic paint. So I'm not worried about coloring over my lines because, like I said, I'm going to restamp those. So I'm going in and painting these bears like polar bears. So I am laying down white. I know that you can't really see it because the paper's white, but that helps you be able to blend other colors into it. And nothing is really 100% white. If you look at polar bears, they do have actually more of a yellow tint to them, but I'm just taking a little bit of that gray and just blending in some areas to add like shadow detail and just to add some interest to what would otherwise just be a plain white bear. And while I'm working in that wet white paint, I'm able to blend that gray into there so there's no harsh lines and it just kind of blends all together. So overall, for the first time using these, they were very easy to use. I like the colors of these. I definitely need to play with them more. It's just a totally different experience than working with watercolor. But if you're having a hard time with watercolor, these are kind of nice because they don't use as much water, so your pages aren't going to get as wet. You don't have to worry so much about things bleeding into each other and moving as easily as watercolors do. So if you feel like you're having a hard time controlling the color with watercolors, these might be a great option for you to try using. And there's lots of tutorials on YouTube that are way more experienced than me that can show you tips and tricks for using gouache. So I'm just going in and painting in all the little details of the bear, trying to pick colors that match the kit as much as possible. They're not perfect, but it turned out just okay. And like I said, I am not worried about coloring over the lines. So there's little itty bitty details and I am just keeping it fairly simple. I am working with a teeny tiny little paintbrush because these are small areas. So, there isn't a lot of places to add color, but it's just adds a different effect than watercolor because it's more opaque. So you get just this really good color payoff with the gouache. So I went ahead and fussy cut out those little bears, and I love how they turned out. They're super cute. When I painted in the stars, I just made sure to not touch my black lines because I wasn't going to re-stamp that, and it came out okay. So for my title, I have, like I said, some of these letters that I stamped with the Elemental Alpha using the pattern papers, and then fussy cut them out. I did this for the last card and really liked the look of it, and it's just a fun way to add a pop of color on there. So I'm just trying to figure out layout wise how to fit everything on there. These cards are nice because they're smaller, so they come together quick, but they're smaller, so you have less space to work on. So you just kind of have to be mindful of that when you're using big die cuts and things like that. I'm going to add a little bit of this buffalo plaid washi towards the bottom just so the bears look like they're sitting on something and not just floating on the card. And most of my background gets covered up, but that's okay. There's still little, stars peeking out behind the bears. I'm going to add my alphas through my Xyron sticker maker. This is going to add adhesive to the entire back side of these and turn them into like little custom alphabet stickers, and it just makes it way easier than having to individually glue these letters down because they are kind of small. So I just press down on there to make sure all the extra adhesive gets picked up, and then you just take this transfer sheet off the front, and then you can just pick these up and they are ready to go. So I found it helpful to use some craft tweezers. These ones are from ByTheWell4God. Again, everything will be linked in the description box for you guys. And I'm just going to kind of tuck these behind the bears, and it just turned out super cute. I used some of those tile alphas as well. So my title says The Gift of a New Heart. And then for the top there, I'm just adding one of the die cut bow pieces onto that tab. I did go in with a white gel pen and just added a little bit of a highlight to the left side of the alphas, just to kind of add some contrast between them and the background. There's a lot of white in the bears, but there wasn't really any white anywhere else, so I wanted to kind of help those letters stick out. And then now we can work on the back side of the card. So we're going to keep it fairly simple because I need some room to write out the Bible verse. So I'm just going to repeat stamping this star piece here, and I'm inking that up with some gold ink. And then I'm going to stamp this ticket piece onto some more pattern paper and then fussy cut that out. One thing I didn't show on camera and forgot to mention was those bears. Before I cut them out again, I put them back into my stamp positioning tool and re-stamped. And because that stamp was on the door in the exact same spot, I was able to put the paper down in the exact same spot and re-stamp over the bears and get those black lines back that I had covered up with the gouache. I don't know what happened to that footage, but it just didn't end up in the video. So I will try to show that again in a future video, but it's fairly easy if you have a stamp positioning tool. If you don't have a stamp positioning tool, you can just line up your stamp over the top and just stamp again. I've showed it in the past with other acrylic paint techniques and things like that. I did use some dies from Coco and Reno to cut out a little circle piece out of those pattern papers that I'm going to layer behind this little candy cane, just creating another little cluster on the back of the card here, and trimming off any excess. I did let that big bear kind of hang over the edge, but I made sure that it was not going to interfere with the MemoryDex box once I put the card in there. So I can go ahead and copy down the verse. I have realized that one negative to filming with my phone versus my regular camera is that I don't have my phone to look up my Bible verses, but luckily I have a whole stack of Bibles in my office. So there's Ezekiel 36:26. There's the front of the card, and that is going to be it for the project today. So if you have any questions or comments, be sure to leave those down below. Again, check out the description box for links to everything that I used. Give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. Subscribe to my channel if you're not already subscribed. Be sure to click on that bell notification button so you don't miss any future videos from me. And until next time, thank you so much. Bye-bye.